Then a woman who had been observing the scene from a nearby bench stood up, dressed in simple clothes, but with a posture that exuded silent authority. She approached. "Sergeant, this is unacceptable. The lady isn't doing anything wrong," she said, her voice calm but firm. Mendez turned to her, a mocking smile on his face. Well, what do we have here? A meddling socialite playing hero. Don't get involved where you're not called, madam. Go mind your own business before I decide you're also disrupting the flow of the square." He pointed a finger at her, arrogance overflowing. "I am an officer of the law, and you are just a curious bystander. Or do you want me to handcuff you for contempt?" The woman remained calm, a cold glint in her eyes. "Contempt, Sergeant. I'm sure the Inspector General's office will be very interested to hear about your flow and your handcuffs." Mendez's smile faltered. "Inspector General's office? Who do you think you are, you crazy woman?" The woman then, with a slow and deliberate movement, pulled a leather badge from inside her purse, revealing it. The civil police emblem gleamed under the sun. "I am Dr. Helena Vasconcelos, Inspector General of the Civil Police, and you, Sergeant Mendez, have just committed a series of crimes in front of me. Your handcuffs, Sergeant, will be for you." Mendez's face, previously red with anger, instantly paled, cold sweat trickling down his forehead as panic seized his eyes. Sergeant Mendez's world collapsed in a split second. That badge, the civil police emblem, shining under the square's sun, was not just a piece of metal. It was the seal of his ruin. The icy panic that took over his eyes wasn't just for contempt or for the extortion money he was trying to shake down. It was for the slap he had just delivered to the face of the woman who revealed herself to be the Inspector General. The irony was cruel, the humiliation unbearable. His body, previously inflated with arrogance, shrunk, his shoulders dropping as if carrying the weight of all his crimes. His voice vanished, his mouth went dry, and the cold sweat trickling down his forehead seemed to burn. Dr. Helena Vasconcelos, now without the disguise of a casual observer, kept the badge visible for another moment, allowing reality to sink into Mendez's disturbed mind. Her eyes, previously calm, now carried the weight of unquestionable authority and a cutting coldness. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to gesticulate. Her mere presence and the revelation of her identity were more potent than any threat. "Sergeant Mendez," she began, her voice still low, but with a resonance that echoed through the stunned silence of the square. The few people witnessing the scene, previously curious, were now in shock, their conversations muffled in incredulous whispers. "You not only extorted a citizen, but you also physically assaulted her. And, to your misfortune, that citizen is me." The confession, uttered with a deadly calm, hit Mendez like lightning. The candy vendor, the woman he had humiliated, whom he had slapped, was the Inspector General. The ground seemed to disappear beneath his feet. He tried to stammer something, a flimsy excuse, a plea for clemency, but the words caught in his throat, transformed into an unintelligible grunt. Helena put the badge away with the same deliberate movement with which she had revealed it. Then she pulled her cell phone from her pocket. "Team Alpha, Inspector General Helena, Code Red at Liberty Square. Sergeant Mendez from the 12th Precinct, requesting immediate arrest for extortion, abuse of authority, and assault. Arrive discreetly but urgently." Her voice, clear and concise on the phone, was a death sentence for Mendez. He looked around desperately, searching for an escape route, a hole to hide in, but the square, once a stage for his petty tyranny, was now a trap. The gazes of passers-by, previously of fear or indifference, were now of repulsion and an unsettling sense of justice. The old woman who sold candy, whom he believed he had subjugated, now watched him with unshakable dignity. the red mark on her cheek a silent testament to the violence she had suffered. "Sergeant," Helena continued, without averting her gaze from his, "this is just the tip of the iceberg. Your conduct, and that of others like you, has been monitored for months. Operation Clean Sweep is in full swing, and you, unfortunately for you, were the first to fall into the net. Believe me, there will be nowhere to hide." Mendez felt a shiver run down his spine. The operation. He had heard rumors, whispers in the precinct corridors about an internal investigation, but had always dismissed them as paranoia. Now reality hit him with brutal force. He wasn't just a corrupt police officer caught in the act. He was a pawn in a much larger game, the first to be sacrificed to expose a network of rot. His eyes, now tearful with terror, met Helena's. He saw not anger, but a cold, relentless determination. She wasn't there for revenge, but to deliver justice, and he was the perfect instrument to begin that journey. In a few minutes, 2 unmarked vehicles approached the square, stopping at a discreet distance. 4 agents, in plain clothes, but with the unmistakable posture of professionals, got out and headed directly for Mendez. They didn't need verbal orders. The Inspector General merely nodded, and the agents, with precise and silent movements, surrounded the sergeant. "Sergeant Mendez," one of the agents said, his voice firm as he immobilized him, "you are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided." The handcuffs, the very ones Mendez had threatened to use on the Inspector General, now clicked on his own wrists. The metallic sound echoed in the square, sealing his fate. The humiliation was complete. He, the predator, had become the prey. And it all began with a slap to an old candy vendor. A candy vendor who was, in fact, the Inspector General of the Civil Police. Disguised, ready to dismantle an empire of corruption. The tension in the air was palpable. Justice, finally, was beginning to be served. The metallic sound of the handcuffs on his own wrists was the final blow for Sergeant Mendez. There was nowhere left to run, no excuses to invent. That dry click echoed not only in the square, but in every fiber of his being, sealing a fate he never imagined. His eyes, previously full of panic, now carried a desperate emptiness. The image of Inspector General Dr. Helena Vasconcelos etched into his retina. She was no longer the old candy vendor, but the personification of the relentless justice he had so disdained. The agents, with silent and professional efficiency, led him to one of the unmarked vehicles. With each step, Mendez felt the weight of the gazes upon him. The curious, the relieved, those who finally saw the scales of justice tip to the right side. The humiliation was a heavy cloak, more suffocating than the handcuffs themselves. He, the predator, was now the prey, dragged out of his small kingdom of tyranny where the law was his own will and fear his currency. As the car drove away, taking Mendez to what would be the beginning of his personal hell, Dr. Helena Vasconcelos remained in the square for a few more moments. She watched the vehicle disappear into the distance, the expression on her face a mixture of weariness and iron determination. The square, once a stage for a cruel farce, now breathed a different, lighter air. People gradually returned to their routines, but with a new awareness, a whisper of hope. She turned to the 2 agents who had stayed behind. "Team, excellent work, precision and discretion as expected." Her voice was calm, but laden with authority. "Mendez will be taken to Internal Affairs headquarters. I want him interrogated immediately. Do not allow any external contact. We need to know how deep this rot extends." One of the agents, a man with a serious demeanor and sharp eyes, nodded. "Understood, Dr. Helena. No privileges, no loopholes. He'll sing." Helena nodded. "He will, and when he does, we'll have the names. Names that will lead us to the next links in the chain. Operation Clean Sweep cannot stop. Mendez was just the tip of the iceberg, the first domino to fall. But there's an entire network of corruption, of abuse of power that needs to be dismantled. She walked slowly to the bench where she had been sitting, watching the scene unfold. The candy vendor disguise, the subtle makeup that aged her, the simple clothes, everything had served its purpose. The slap, the sting on her cheek, still burned ill. But the physical pain was insignificant compared to the satisfaction of seeing justice begin to be done. It was a constant reminder of what many ordinary citizens faced daily at the hands of men like Mendez. Our intelligence indicated that the 12th precinct was a hotbed of extortion and bribery, but Mendez's audacity in broad daylight and the way he treated the most vulnerable, this needed to be exposed unequivocally, Helena reflected, more to herself than to the agents. The credibility of the Inspector General's office depended on irrefutable proof, something that couldn't be denied or covered up. Operation Clean Sweep was an ambitious project, conceived to sweep away the systemic corruption that was corroding the police force from within. Months of planning, infiltrations, wiretaps, and surveillance had culminated in this moment. Helena knew the risk was immense. Exposing such a vast network meant facing powerful enemies, not just on the streets, but in the corridors of power. Each step forward was a deeper dive into a swamp of shady interests and perverted loyalties. The next step, she continued, turning to the agents, is to consolidate the evidence against Mendez and use his testimony to map out the next targets. I want detailed reports of all suspicious transactions, all unjustifiably archived complaints, all the links he can give us. The agents nodded, the seriousness on their faces reflecting the gravity of the task. They were the elite of the Inspector General's office, men and women loyal to the law, not to individuals. They were Helena's front line, her eyes and ears in a world of shadows. "And as for my disguise," Helena said with a slight bitter smile, touching her still sensitive cheek, "I think I can retire the candy vendor for now. But Dr. Helena Vasconcelos has a lot of work to do. Believe me, Sergeant Mendez was just the beginning. The real battle is just starting, and it will be long and arduous." The afternoon sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple as the Inspector General stood up. The square, now calmer, held the secret of a day that would change the course of justice in her city. Operation Clean Sweep had taken its first resounding step, and Dr. Helena Vasconcelos' shadow, previously disguised, now loomed imposing over those who dared to corrupt the law. The game had begun. The sun was beginning to bid farewell to Liberty Square, but for Dr. Helena Vasconcelos, the day was just beginning. The afternoon breeze, which once seemed to carry the whispers of everyday life, now brought the metallic echo of handcuffs and the promise of an even greater battle. She watched the last orange rays touch the horizon, a reminder that, for some, the day ended, but for her and her team, the night would be long and decisive. The sting on her cheek was a physical reminder of the brutality she had witnessed and suffered, a small sacrifice compared to the magnitude of what was at stake. Leaving the square behind, Helena got into an unmarked car, where one of the agents was already waiting for her. The silence in the vehicle was heavy, broken only by the soft purr of the engine. She closed her eyes for an instant, allowing the image of Mendez, his face contorted in panic and humiliation, to dissolve. There was no personal satisfaction in his downfall, only the cold realization that an obstacle had been removed. The Inspector General's office was not a stage for revenge, but an instrument of cleansing. "Report from the transport team," she asked, her voice firm, opening her eyes and facing the agent. "Has Mendez arrived at headquarters?" "Yes, Dr. Helena. He was taken directly to Interrogation Room 3. No one had contact with him, as ordered. Dr. Almeida is already ready to begin the procedure, but awaits your instructions." Helena nodded. "Doctor, Almeida was one of her best, an interrogator with the patience of a saint and the shrewdness of a predator. He knew how to unravel the layers of lies and fear. Excellent. Tell Dr. Almeida to start with the basics. Let him marinate a bit in his own despair. We don't want him to think he has any room for negotiation now. He needs to understand the gravity of his situation before we start extracting names. As the car headed for the Inspector General's office headquarters, Helena mentally reviewed the next steps. Mendez's arrest was a milestone, yes, but it was only the first domino. Operation Clean Sweep had been meticulously planned to be a cascade. Each piece that fell should knock down the next, revealing the extent of the rot. The 12th precinct was a focus, but the tentacles of corruption were longer, reaching other precincts, other echelons, perhaps even the high command. The Inspector General's office headquarters was an imposing but discreet building, away from the media spotlight. Its walls held secrets and the hopes of a fairer police force. Upon entering, Helena felt the energy of the place, a mixture of urgency and determination. Agents moved through the corridors, their gazes serious, the discipline palpable. They were the backbone of her mission, the few who still believed in the integrity of the uniform. She went directly to the monitoring room, a dark room full of screens and recording equipment. On the other side of the one-way glass, Sergeant Mendez sat alone in a Spartan room. His handcuffs had been removed, but freedom was an illusion. He seemed smaller, shrunken, his former arrogance completely undone. His eyes wandered around the room, searching for something, anything that could offer a glimpse of hope. There was none. "He's ready to break," a voice beside Helena said. It was Dr. Almeida, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp as razors fixed on Mendez. The initial shock is always the most potent. He knows he's in a deep hole. Helena watched Mendez for a few more minutes, studying his body language, the way he rubbed his hands, the almost imperceptible tremor on his lips. "Let him feel the weight of every second, Dr. Almeida. When you go in, remind him that we're not just interested in his small extortion ring. We're interested in who protected him, who instructed him, who benefited from his filth, and make it clear that the only way to alleviate his own situation is to cooperate fully." Dr. Almeida nodded, an almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He knew what to do. The interrogation room door opened and he entered, his calm presence filling the space. Mendez raised his head, his eyes wide like a cornered animal. Helena, on the other side of the glass, felt the adrenaline course through her veins. The slap on her cheek, the public humiliation, all of it was fuel for her determination. Mendez was not just a criminal. He was the key to unraveling a much larger web. Operation Clean Sweep was not just about arresting a few corrupt police officers. It was about restoring trust in a vital institution, about showing citizens that justice, however slow, still existed. "Believe me," she murmured, more to herself than to the team around her, as she watched Dr. Almeida begin the interrogation, his voice soft but relentless. "Sergeant Mendez was just the beginning. The real battle is just beginning, and it will be long and arduous." Dr. Helena Vasconcelos's shadow, now undisguised, loomed, imposing, over those who dared to corrupt the law. The game had begun, and she was ready to play to the end. Dr. Almeida's voice was a soft, almost hypnotic melody, yet charged with unquestionable authority. On the other side of the glass, Helena observed every micro-expression on Mendez's face. The sergeant, once a colossus of arrogance, was now crumbling into a pathetic, cornered figure. Almeida did not shout, did not threaten. He simply presented the facts, one by one, like pieces of a puzzle that Mendez knew he could not reassemble. The video recording of his extortion in the square, the victims' testimonies, the long-archived complaints that now resurfaced with full force. "Sergeant Mendez," Almeida began, his voice echoing slightly in the Spartan room. "We are not here to judge your morality. We are here to understand the extent of your actions and, more importantly, the actions of those who allowed you to act this way. You are not a lone wolf, are you?" Mendez shook his head, an almost imperceptible movement. His eyes, previously filled with anger and contempt, now reflected a primal fear. He tried to speak, but the words seemed stuck in his throat. The reality of his situation struck him with the force of a hammer. He was alone, without his influential friends, without the protection he believed he had. Helena nodded to herself. Almeida was on the right track. Shock was the first step. Despair would follow, and with it the truth. She knew that Mendez was not the mastermind behind everything. He was an enforcer, a link in the chain, perhaps one of the most visible, but certainly not the most powerful. The real hunt was just beginning. "He's trying to process the information," Helena murmured, her voice low to the team around her. "It hasn't fully sunk in yet. He still believes he can negotiate, that he can minimize. Almeida needs to break that illusion." Dr. Almeida, as if hearing her thoughts, slightly shifted his posture. "Sergeant, don't insult me. Do you think we're naive? Do you think a police officer of your rank, with your record, would act with such impunity without someone far above you guaranteeing your protection? Who archived the complaints against you? Who turned a blind eye to your activities? Who received a slice of the pie?" The silence in the interrogation room was deafening. Mendez looked down, his hands trembling. He was crumbling. Helena felt a shiver, the slap on her cheek, the humiliation. All of it was a small price to pay for this moment. Justice, slow and painful, was beginning to manifest. I don't know what you're talking about," Mendez stammered, his voice hoarse, a weak attempt at denial. Almeida smiled, a humorless smile. "Sergeant, don't insult me. Do you think we're naive? Do you think a police officer of your rank, with your record, would act with such impunity without someone far above you guaranteeing your protection? Who archived the complaints against you? Who turned a blind eye to your activities? Who received a slice of the pie?" The silence in the interrogation room was deafening. Mendez looked down, his hands trembling. He was crumbling. Helena felt a shiver, the slap on her cheek, the humiliation. All of it was a small price to pay for this moment. Justice, slow and painful, was beginning to manifest. He hesitated, an internal conflict visible on his face. Loyalty, or what remained of it, fought against the instinct of self-preservation. Helena watched with surgical attention. This was the crucial moment, the break. I don't know what you're talking about," Mendez stammered, his voice hoarse, a weak attempt at denial. Almeida smiled a humorless smile. "Sergeant, don't insult me. Do you think we're naive? Do you think a police officer of your rank, with your record, would act with such impunity without someone far above you guaranteeing your protection? Who archived the complaints against you? Who turned a blind eye to your activities? Who received a slice of the pie?" The silence in the interrogation room was deafening. Mendez looked down, his hands trembling. He was crumbling. Helena felt a shiver, the slap on her cheek, the humiliation. All of it was a small price to pay for this moment. Justice, slow and painful, was beginning to manifest. Captain Fonseca," Mendez whispered so low that the recording team had to adjust the levels. He was the one who guaranteed protection, and Commander Bittencourt knew everything. He received the largest share. The monitoring room was filled with a murmur of contained excitement. Captain Fonseca and Commander Bittencourt. Big names, names that confirmed Helena's suspicions that the rot extended far beyond a simple sergeant. Helena closed her eyes for a brief moment, absorbing the information. Operation Clean Sweep was gaining a new dimension. Mendez was not just the tip of the iceberg. He was the first crack in a much larger structure. Fonseca and Bittencourt were influential figures with deep connections. Dismantling them would be a Herculean task, requiring surgical precision and unwavering courage. "Write everything down," Helena instructed the team, her voice now more urgent. "I want all the details on Fonseca and Bittencourt. History, financial movements, previous complaints, contacts, everything. We need a complete dossier on these two by dawn." She turned to Dr. Almeida, who was still in the interrogation room, now pressing Mendez for more details, for concrete evidence, for other names. Almeida's voice was more incisive, taking advantage of the sergeant's vulnerability. "Sergeant Mendez was just the beginning," Helena repeated, the phrase gaining new weight. "Now, the real battle begins, and it will be long and arduous. These names, they are just the next step on a ladder that leads much higher. We need to be prepared for what comes next. They won't fall without a fight." The game had begun, and Dr. Helena Vasconcelos, the Inspector General, was ready to play to the end, no matter how dirty or dangerous it became. The shadow that once loomed over the square now stretched over the corridors of power, promising an unprecedented cleansing. Mendez's voice, previously a trembling whisper, now took on a tone of calculated despair, as if with each name uttered, a weight was lifted from his shoulders, transferred to the vast and impersonal machinery of justice. On the other side of the glass, Helena observed the scene with an almost palpable intensity. Dr. Almeida, a master in the art of interrogation, did not allow the sergeant to settle into confession. He pushed him gently but firmly into the depths of the rot Mendez had helped build. "Captain Fonseca, Sergeant," Almeida insisted, his voice calm, but charged with unquestionable authority. "How did he operate? What were the terms? And Commander Bittencourt? Did he just receive, or did he play an active role in organizing the extortion?" Mendez took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the floor, as if the answers were written there in the cement dust. "Fonseca. He was the intermediary. He made the connections. He said who could be squeezed, who had money. He ensured no one on our team slipped up and that complaints were made to disappear. Bittencourt. He was the boss. Most of it went to him. He gave the final orders, decided who was untouchable and who could be exploited. He had contacts, many contacts. In the public prosecutor's office, in the Inspector General's office itself. He said he was protected from above. The mention of contacts in the Inspector General's office itself sent a shiver down Helena's spine. The rot was even deeper than she imagined. It wasn't just one precinct. It was a systemic infiltration. Protected from above. That phrase echoed in her mind, a grim warning. In the monitoring room, the team worked feverishly. Fonseca's and Bittencourt's names were typed into databases, cross-referenced with intelligence already collected. Connection maps began to form on the screens, revealing a complex web of favors, money, and power. "He's giving up the structure," Helena murmured to the head of her intelligence team, Inspector Carlos. "But he won't give everything at once. He's testing the limits, seeing how much he can bargain. We need concrete evidence, not just testimonies, bank accounts, call records, witnesses who can directly link Fonseca and Bittencourt to the crimes." Carlos nodded, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "We're pulling everything, Inspector General. Fonseca has a history of suspicious transfers to offshore accounts. Bittencourt, on the other hand, is more discreet, but his spending pattern doesn't match his salary, and there are some old complaints, dubiously archived, that mention both. We're reopening everything." Helena turned her gaze back to Mendez. The sergeant, exhausted, continued to pour out information, details about secret meetings, codes used for communication, locations for money drops. He was emptying himself, the dam of his resistance finally broken. "He's scared," Helena observed, scared of what Fonseca and Bittencourt might do to him if they know he talked. Almeida, reinforce Mendez's protection. He's a key piece now. And make it clear that the only way to ensure his safety is to cooperate fully and turn over everyone involved. Almeida's voice, amplified in the monitoring room, echoed Helena's instruction. Sergeant Mendez, your safety now depends on your full cooperation. The names you mentioned are powerful. They will not hesitate to silence anyone who threatens them. The Inspector General's office is your only protection. But for that we need everything, every detail, every name, every piece of evidence. Mendez raised his head, his eyes bloodshot. They'll kill me, he whispered, his voice laden with genuine dread. They have people everywhere. I saw what they did to those who tried to leave. That's exactly why you need to help us bring them down, Helena thought, her determination hardening. The slap she had received in the square seemed insignificant compared to the network of terror and corruption Mendez was unraveling. It was no longer just about personal revenge. It was about dismantling a system that corroded public trust and destroyed lives. Inspector Carlos, Helena commanded, her voice firm and urgent. Prepare the teams. I want search and seizure warrants for Captain Fonseca's and Commander Bittencourt's offices and residences. But not now. We need more information, more irrefutable evidence. They are cunning. They will try to destroy everything. We need to act with surgical precision. Yes, Inspector General, Carlos replied, the seriousness in his voice reflecting the gravity of the situation. We'll set up a coordinated operation. We need an element of surprise. Helena nodded, and prepare a team to monitor every move Fonseca and Bittencourt make from now on. Phones, emails, meetings. I want to know who they contact, who they try to influence. They'll feel the net closing in, and when they do, they'll try to react. We need to be one step ahead and reinforce Mendez's protection. He's a goldmine of information, but also a target. The monitoring room hummed with the energy of a beehive. Operation Clean Sweep had escalated to a new level. Fonseca and Bittencourt were not just big fish. They were sharks swimming in deep, murky waters. Bringing them down would require not only courage, but impeccable strategy and flawless execution. Helena felt the weight of responsibility, but also a surge of adrenaline. The slap on her cheek, the humiliation, all of it was a small price to pay for this moment. Justice, slow and painful, was beginning to manifest. She knew the battle would be long and arduous, but Dr. Helena Vasconcelos, the Inspector General, was ready to play to the end, no matter how dirty or dangerous it became. The shadow that once loomed over the square now stretched over the corridors of power, promising an unprecedented cleansing, whatever the cost. The air in the monitoring room was charged with a palpable electricity. Each keyboard click, each muffled murmur from the team, seemed amplified in the tension that enveloped the environment. Screens glowed with data, connection graphs, and profiles of individuals who, just hours before, seemed untouchable, Captain Fonseca and Commander Bittencourt. Their names echoed in Helena's mind, no longer as mere suspicions, but as concrete targets, the next pieces to be knocked down on the chessboard of corruption. Inspector Carlos, his brow furrowed in concentration, pointed to one of the monitors. Inspector General, Fonseca's transfer patterns are complex. He uses a network of shell companies, some registered in tax havens. It's a labyrinth, but we're starting to map the exits. Helena approached, her eyes fixed on the money flows drawing themselves on the screen. And Bittencourt, he's more discreet, isn't he? Where's his trail? Bittencourt leaves no obvious financial trails, Carlos explained, adjusting his glasses. He operates with cash, properties in the names of fronts, and investments in local businesses that seem legitimate at first glance. But we're cross-referencing information with old complaints, those that were conveniently archived. There's a pattern of undervalued property acquisitions, always at key moments after major operations he oversaw. The mention of the archived complaints sent a chill down Helena's spine. Who archived them? Is there a recurring name in these processes? Carlos hesitated for an instant, his voice lower. Yes, Inspector General. In at least 3 cases involving Bittencourt, the recommendation for archiving came from a specific prosecutor in the public prosecutor's office. And in one of them, the investigation was closed by a colleague of ours, here at the Inspector General's office. The phrase, colleague of ours, hit Helena like a blow. The infiltration was real, and it was closer than she imagined. Mendez's phrase, protected from above, gained an even more sinister meaning. Who? She asked, her voice almost a whisper, but charged with unshakable authority. Doctor. Ricardo Suarez, Deputy Inspector General, Carlos replied, avoiding Helena's gaze. He signed the opinion that deemed the evidence insufficient in 2018 in an extortion case that directly involved Bittencourt's name. A knot formed in Helena's stomach. Ricardo Suarez, a man she knew, with whom she had shared meetings and discussions about the future of the institution. The betrayal, if confirmed, would be a devastating blow. But there was no time for emotions. Operation Clean Sweep demanded a cold, calculating mind. Continue monitoring Suarez, Helena instructed, her voice regaining its firmness. Don't confront him. Don't let him realize we're investigating. We need irrefutable proof before we make any move against him. For now, our main focus remains Fonseca and Bittencourt. They are the most visible tip of the iceberg. In the interrogation room, Mendez's voice, previously a trembling whisper, now took on a tone of calculated despair, as if with each name uttered, a weight was lifted from his shoulders, transferred to the vast and impersonal machinery of justice. Dr. Almeida, a master in the art of interrogation, did not allow the sergeant to settle into confession. He pushed him, gently but firmly, into the depths of the rot Mendez had helped build. Sergeant, you mentioned money drop locations, Almeida insisted, his voice calm but charged with unquestionable authority. Describe them in detail, and the codes you used to communicate. We need everything that can give us an advantage. Mendez, with bloodshot eyes and a pale face, began to describe an intricate system of meetings in discreet restaurants, abandoned gas stations, and even a shooting club frequented by police officers. They used an encrypted messaging app, but the codes were simple. Coffee meant the weekly bribe. Adjustment was for a larger payment from a specific operation. Cleanup was when someone needed to be silenced or a complaint made to disappear. Helena listened, each detail fitting together like pieces of a macabre puzzle. The complexity of the network was impressive, but it also revealed an arrogance on the part of the corrupt, a belief in their invincibility. Inspector Carlos, prepare the teams, Helena commanded, her voice firm and urgent. I want search and seizure warrants for Captain Fonseca's and Commander Bittencourt's offices and residences, but not now. We need more information, more irrefutable evidence. They are cunning. They will try to destroy everything. We need to act with surgical precision. I want the surveillance team ready to follow their every move. If they feel the net closing, they'll try to get rid of the evidence. We need to catch them in the act, or with the evidence still in hand. Exactly, Helena agreed, and prepare a team to monitor every move Fonseca and Bittencourt make from now on. Phones, emails, meetings. I want to know who they contact, who they try to influence. They'll feel the net closing in, and when they do, they'll try to react. We need to be one step ahead and reinforce Mendez's protection. He's a gold mine of information, but also a target. The clock advanced, and with it, the certainty that the night would be long and dawn would bring with it the beginning of a declared war. In the monitoring room, time seemed to dissolve into caffeine and adrenaline. Each team member, eyes fixed on the screens glowing in the dim light, was a vital cog in the machine Helena Vasconcelos was assembling. The fatigue was palpable, but the urgency of the mission superseded any need for rest. Inspector Carlos, his voice hoarse but tireless, pointed to a data stream. "Inspector General, Fonseca is agitated. Since Mendez started talking, he's made a series of unusual calls. One of them to a number registered to an overseas legal consulting firm known for acting in money laundering cases. And there's a meeting scheduled for 3 in the morning in an abandoned warehouse in the port area." Helena felt a shiver. Fonseca's haste to move his pieces was a clear sign that he felt the pressure, even without knowing its origin. "Who will be at the meeting?" she asked, her voice calm, but her mind racing. "We don't have identification yet, Inspector General, but the surveillance team is in position. They'll monitor closely, without being detected." Meanwhile, Bittencourt's trail was more subtle, but equally disturbing. "Bittencourt, on the other hand, is in containment mode," Carlos continued. "He's spent the last few hours at home, making and receiving few calls, all to family or routine contacts. But our field agents report that he's burning documents in a fireplace in his backyard. Small amounts so as not to arouse suspicion, but the smell of burning paper is unmistakable." The image of Bittencourt destroying evidence, methodical and cold, reinforced the man's calculating nature. He was not an agitator like Fonseca, but a silent predator, even more dangerous. Helena knew that patience would be crucial to catching him. In the isolation of the interrogation bunker, Mendez, exhausted but visibly relieved to unburden himself, continued to pour out information. Dr. Almeida, a psychologist trained to extract every ounce of truth, kept him focused. "Sergeant, you mentioned that Fonseca had an archive of secrets, of information about others involved. Where did he keep that?" Mendez hesitated, his eyes wide, as if the revelation were a new burden. He had a safe at his country house outside the city. They say inside are the names of everyone, the big ones, those above him. The mention of the safe made Helena's heart quicken. The country house, a less obvious location for an immediate search, but potentially the treasure of the operation. "Carlos, add Fonseca's country house to the warrant list, maximum priority for the safe, and reinforce surveillance there. If he feels we're close, he might try to move the contents." The tension in the monitoring room was almost palpable. Each new piece of information was another thread in the complex web they were unraveling. But Ricardo Suarez's shadow loomed, silent and threatening. The discreet monitoring team on the Deputy Inspector General had not yet found anything conclusive, just the impeccable routine of a high-ranking bureaucrat. But the absence of irregularities in itself was almost an irregularity. Given the gravity of Mendez's accusations, Helena knew that patience would be key. One false step, and the entire operation could collapse. The memory of the slap in the square, of the public humiliation, returned to Helena's mind. It was no longer just about that moment, but about Mendez's face, the fear in his eyes, the rot he revealed. That slap had been the trigger, but the explosion that would come would be much larger, sweeping through the corridors of power. As the night progressed, Carlos's team prepared for the surveillance of Fonseca's meeting. Silent drones, high-resolution cameras, and disguised agents positioned themselves strategically. Precision was vital. Any error could alert the targets and compromise years of work. Helena walked to the monitoring room window, watching the first lights of dawn paint the sky gray and pink. The city still slept, oblivious to the silent war that was about to erupt within its entrails. Operation Clean Sweep was no longer an investigation. It was a crusade, and Dr. Helena Vasconcelos, the Inspector General, was ready to lead the attack, whatever the cost. Justice, she knew, would demand a high price, but the freedom of a city was worth every sacrifice. Dawn brought not only daylight, but the promise of a battle that would forever change the face of the Inspector General's office and the police. Dawn broke, cold and silent, over the sleeping city, but in the monitoring room, the silence was only apparent. A constant hum of machines and controlled whispers filled the air. Helena's eyes, red from lack of sleep, were fixed on the main screen, where the grainy image of an abandoned warehouse in the port area flickered. It was the location of Fonseca's meeting, the nerve center of that night. "Team Alpha in position," Inspector Carlos's voice sounded, calm and professional through the communicator. "3 vehicles, 2 men. One of them is Fonseca, the other... We don't have clear identification yet. He appears to be the contact from the foreign consultancy, a man in an impeccable suit, despite the desolate setting." Helena felt a tightening in her chest. That man, the consultant, represented the international branch of corruption, the bridge to the money laundering that Mendez had only scratched the surface of. "Maintain distance, Carlos. Priority is security and evidence collection. I want clear audio and video. Every word, every movement." On the screen, Fonseca, visibly tense, gesticulated with the man in the suit. The body language was one of urgency, of contained desperation. A dark briefcase, almost invisible in the dim light, was exchanged. Money, evidence, the machine of corruption in full operation under the watchful eyes of the Inspector General's office. With each second, the image became clearer, the evidence more irrefutable. Helena's breathing was almost inaudible, but her mind worked at maximum speed, processing every detail. As the scene unfolded at the port, the field team monitoring Bittencourt sent updates. "Inspector General, the smell of smoke is stronger. Our agents confirm that Bittencourt is burning documents in a makeshift bonfire in his backyard. He's being methodical, burning small piles. But the total volume must be significant. He seems like an automaton, unhurried but relentless." Frustration was a bitter taste in Helena's mouth. Bittencourt, the silent predator, was trying to erase his tracks with the coldness of a killer. "Carlos, can we recover anything? Ashes, residues? We need anything that can be analyzed." "We're working on it, Inspector General. The forensic team is already on standby. As soon as we have a window, they'll move in, but he's vigilant. Any false move could alert him. He seems to be waiting for something, or someone." The complexity of the operation was exhausting. 2 targets, 2 distinct approaches, but equally cruel in their attempt to subvert justice. Fonseca, desperate to move his money and perhaps flee. Bittencourt, calculating, destroying the evidence that linked him to the network. The Inspector General felt the weight of every decision, knowing that one mistake could cost years of work and the institution's own credibility. In the interrogation bunker, Mendez, now with an almost inaudible voice, but still driven by Dr. Almeida, continued to unravel the secrets. The sergeant, exhausted, looked like a deflated puppet, but the torrent of information did not cease. The safe at Fonseca's country house. It has a biometric security system. Only he can open it. But he once told me that there was an emergency key hidden in a plant pot in the greenhouse next to the house. A pot of rare orchids. He was obsessed with them. The information was a ray of light in the darkness. The emergency key, the safe, the names of the big ones. Helena felt adrenaline course through her veins. "Carlos, notify the field team at Fonseca's country house. I want that greenhouse and that plant pot under constant surveillance. No one touches it until we have the warrant and the forensic team. But we need to know if he tries to access it or move it. If he moves that safe, we lose the chance to catch the bigger fish." The shadow of Ricardo Suarez, the Deputy Inspector General, persisted. The discreet monitoring team, led by Agent Livia, had not yet found anything linking him directly to Fonseca's and Bittencourt's network. His routine was impeccable, his calls transparent, but Mendes's accusation, whispered with such fear, could not be ignored. The absence of any irregularity in Suarez, given the gravity of the complaints, was, in itself, an enigma. "Livia, any changes in Suarez's routine?" Helena asked, her voice low, almost a whisper, so as not to distract the other teams. "Nothing, Inspector General. He slept at home, woke up at his usual time, made his coffee. No suspicious calls, no unusual contacts. It's as if he's in a bubble of normalcy, completely oblivious to everything that's happening, or perhaps he's too good at hiding." Suarez's normalcy was, for Helena, the greatest of anomalies. A man in his position, if innocent, would perhaps be more involved in the efforts of the Inspector General's office. If guilty, he would be acting with more caution, or perhaps trying to influence the investigation. The absence of any of these behaviors was intriguing and disturbing. Helena remembered the slap, Fonseca's look of contempt. That slap was not just an act of violence against an elderly candy vendor. It was a symbol of impunity, of the arrogance of those who felt above the law. Now, with each new revelation from Mendes, with each move by Fonseca and Bittencourt, Helena saw the web unraveling, and the image of that slap transformed into the driving force of a revenge that transcended the personal. It was the revenge of justice, the promise of a cleansing that the city had long cried out for. The meeting in the warehouse ended. Fonseca and the consultant parted ways. The surveillance team followed, both maintaining distance. The briefcase, now in the consultant's hands, was the material proof they needed. Adrenaline pulsed in the room. "Carlos, prepare the team to intercept the consultant as soon as he is in a safe and isolated location. I want the briefcase and any other evidence he is carrying, and I want him interrogated immediately. He could be the key to unraveling the international branch. We cannot miss this opportunity." The monitoring room, previously a cauldron of contained tension, now buzzed with renewed energy. Dawn was approaching, and with it, the first phase of Operation Clean Sweep was about to culminate in direct action. The search and seizure warrants for Fonseca's and Bittencourt's residences and offices were already ready, awaiting only Helena's signal. She knew the risk was immense. The Inspector General's office was about to attack sharks in their own territory, but Dr. Helena Vasconcelos, the Inspector General, would not back down. The city deserved a cleansing, a purification, and she was ready to be the broom that would sweep away the dirt, whatever the cost. Justice, she knew, would not be swift, but it would be relentless, and the first blow was about to be struck. The war had been declared, and the Inspector General was ready for battle. Carlos's voice cut through the dense air of the monitoring room, charged with contained urgency. "Inspector General, the consultant is heading to an isolated warehouse on the outskirts, far from residential areas. It seems to be a drop-off point or a secondary meeting spot. It's our window." Helena nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen showing the consultant's car, a luxury sedan, gliding silently through the dark streets. "Carlos, green light for the interception. I want the team to be swift and decisive. No injuries, but no room for error. The briefcase is priority number one, and bring the consultant in for interrogation immediately. Dr. Almeida should be ready." Adrenaline surged. The field teams, strategically positioned, awaited the command. In a matter of minutes, the sedan was surrounded by unmarked vehicles. Armed agents, wearing Inspector General's office vests, emerged from the shadows, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The consultant, caught by surprise, offered no resistance. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and he was quickly taken to one of the vehicles. The dark briefcase, still untouched, was recovered from the passenger seat, its contents heavy and promising. Briefcase secure, Inspector General. The consultant is en route to headquarters. No resistance. The material appears intact. Carlos's voice was a relief, but the battle was far from over. Simultaneously, the signal for the search and seizure warrants was given. Tactical teams, warrants in hand, converged on Fonseca's and Bittencourt's residences. Operation Clean Sweep was entering its most critical phase. At Fonseca's country house, the search team, led by an agent specializing in break-ins and security, approached the greenhouse. Mendes's description of the rare orchid pot was accurate. Among dozens of exotic species, a blue ceramic pot with a vibrant petaled orchid stood out. With gloves and tweezers, the agent carefully removed the plant, revealing a small hidden compartment beneath the soil. Inside, an old darkened metal key rested. Inspector General, we found the emergency key. The team is heading to the safe. We are awaiting the forensic team for the opening, but the key is in our possession. The news made Helena take a deep breath. A crucial obstacle had been overcome. That safe held the deepest secrets of the corruption network. Meanwhile, at Bittencourt's residence, the scene was one of controlled chaos. The acrid smell of smoke permeated the air. Bittencourt, a corpulent man with a cold gaze, was in his backyard, still feeding the makeshift bonfire. When the Inspector General's agents stormed in, he didn't even flinch, merely watched with a disturbing calm, as if he had been expecting them. Bittencourt, you are under arrest. Operation Clean Sweep. He said not a word, merely raised his hands slowly, his eyes fixed on the flames consuming the last vestiges of his crimes. The forensic team, equipped with special gear, was already on standby. They began to sift through the ashes, sifting every fragment, every residue, in the hope of finding something that could be reconstructed. The work would be meticulous and time-consuming, but Helena knew that every piece of burned paper represented evidence Bittencourt tried to destroy. Inspector General, Bittencourt is in custody. The forensic team is working on the ashes. The volume is considerable, but we are confident in recovering something. The agent's voice was tense. In the monitoring room, the tension was almost unbearable. Helena alternated her gaze between the screens, each showing a different piece of the operation. The consultant, already at headquarters, was being prepared for interrogation. Fonseca's key, secure. Bittencourt arrested. The first blows had been struck, but Ricardo Suarez's shadow persisted. Livia, the agent responsible for discreet monitoring, sent a new update. Inspector General, Suarez just left home. He's heading to the Inspector General's office. It seems he's going to start his workday normally. Suarez's normalcy was an irritating paradox for Helena. How could a man in his position be so oblivious or so good at feigning obliviousness to an operation of such magnitude? Mendes's accusation echoed in her mind. The big ones, those above him. Was Suarez one of these big ones? Or just a meticulous bureaucrat, innocent in a sea of corruption? Helena felt a chill. The operation was advancing. But the central piece of the puzzle, Suarez's connection, was still hidden. The absence of irregularities was, in a way, the greatest irregularity of all. She needed more. She needed irrefutable proof, something that would break the facade of normalcy. Livia, maintain surveillance on Suarez. Every move, every call, every interaction. If he is who Mendes says he is, he will make a move. Or perhaps he already has. The Inspector General walked to the conference table where Dr. Almeida awaited, the dark briefcase on the cold metal surface. Dr. Almeida, open it. I want to know what Fonseca was trying to move. With surgical gloves, Almeida opened the briefcase. Inside, not only piles of money in various foreign currencies, but also a series of encrypted documents, USB drives, and a small notebook with handwritten notes in code. It was a treasure trove of information. This is more than money, Inspector General. This is the accounting of the operation. The names, the amounts, the dates, the money laundering routes. It seems Fonseca was trying to move not only the money, but also the proof of his international transactions. Dr. Almeida spoke with contained excitement. Helena picked up the notebook, leafing through the pages with her eyes. The notes, though coded, had a pattern. She knew that the Inspector General's office's cryptography team would be able to decipher them. That briefcase was the tip of the iceberg, the concrete evidence that would link Fonseca to a much larger network. The memory of the slap, of the humiliation, returned. But now it was no longer personal pain, but fuel. That slap had been the trigger, but the explosion that followed was the purification the city deserved. Justice would not just be blind, it would be relentless. And Helena Vasconcelos, the Inspector General, was ready to ensure that every one of those responsible paid the price, whatever the cost. The war had been declared, and the Inspector General was winning the first battle, but she knew the war was far from over. Suarez's shadow still loomed, silent and threatening, a reminder that the greatest dangers often hide in plain sight. The Inspector General's office headquarters, previously a discreet beacon of light in the night, now pulsed with a feverish energy. The consultant, a middle-aged man with a hardened demeanor, was in the interrogation room, under the cold spotlights. Dr. Almeida, with his expertise in criminal psychology, sat opposite him, observing with calculated calm. Helena watched from an adjacent room, through the mirrored glass, her mind working at high speed. The consultant, despite being caught by surprise, maintained a defensive posture, his eyes scanning the room, searching for a weakness, an opening. He knew he was in trouble, but his silence was armor. "We know who you are, sir. We know where you come from and what you were transporting." Almeida's voice was soft but charged with authority. "The briefcase you had is just the tip of the iceberg. We have proof of your connections with Fonseca, with Bittencourt, and with a network that extends far beyond our country's borders." The consultant did not react. Only a slight tremor in his jaw betrayed his tension. Helena knew that patience would be key. They needed more than just confirmation of his identity. They needed the names, the contacts, the structure of the international network. Meanwhile, at Fonseca's country house, the forensic team, accompanied by agents, approached the safe. The old key, heavy in the agent's hand, was the promise of revelations. The safe, embedded in the wall behind a false bookshelf, was robust, designed to resist. With a soft click and the creak of old gears, the heavy metal door yielded. The air inside was dense, heavy with the smell of aged paper and metal. Inside, there was not only money, but piles of meticulously organized documents, folders labeled with names and dates, records of financial transactions in tax havens, copies of fake passports, and most shocking, a series of photographs. Photos of Fonseca, Bittencourt, and other high-ranking individuals in secret meetings with shadowy figures, some of them clearly foreign. There was also a leather-bound diary, in Fonseca's unmistakable handwriting, detailing meetings, payments, and plans. The forensic team began to catalogue and package each item with the utmost care. "Inspector General, Fonseca's safe has been opened. It's a treasure trove of information. We have records of money laundering, fake identity documents, and most importantly, a diary that appears to be Fonseca's personal accounting, with names and dates, and photographs, many photographs." The agent's voice over the radio could barely contain his excitement. Helena felt a shiver. The diary and the photographs could be the irrefutable proof they needed to connect the dots, to unmask the big ones Mendes had mentioned, but Suarez's shadow still loomed. In the interrogation room, Almeida continued his pressure. "We know you're not the mastermind, sir. You're a piece. An important piece, yes, but replaceable. Fonseca and Bittencourt are arrested. Their assets confiscated. The network is crumbling. Your only chance to mitigate your situation is to cooperate. Who is above Fonseca? Who are your real bosses? The consultant finally broke his silence, a bitter smile on his lips. You think you've caught the big fish? Fonseca and Bittencourt are just intermediaries, pawns. The real power is far above, untouchable. They have eyes and ears everywhere. If I talk, I'll be dead before the sun sets. The threat was real, and Helena knew it, but the consultant's hesitation was also a sign that he had valuable information. Ensure his safety, Dr. Almeida. Offer protection. He is our bridge to the top. Meanwhile, at the Inspector General's office, Ricardo Suarez had arrived at his office. Livia, discreetly positioned, reported every movement. He seemed perfectly calm, greeting the few employees who were already present, his routine unchanged. But Helena couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The absence of any reaction, Suarez's complete normalcy, was the greatest anomaly. Livia, is there anything different in Suarez's office? Any item out of place? Any document he's handling with more care? Helena asked, her voice low. Nothing, Inspector General. He's reviewing routine reports, organizing his desk. It seems like a normal day, but he made a quick call to a number not registered in the internal directory. Just a good morning and an everything's fine here. The call lasted less than 10 seconds. A shiver ran down Helena's spine. Everything's fine here. A simple phrase, but in the context of the operation, it could be a code, a signal. Was Suarez signaling to someone that the Inspector General's office was advancing or that he was safe? The ambiguity was disturbing. In the analysis room, Dr. Almeida and the cryptography team were already poring over the contents of the briefcase. The USB drives were being copied, the encrypted documents sent for decoding. Fonseca's small notebook with its coded notes was the main focus. Inspector General, Fonseca's notebook. The notes are complex, but we're starting to identify patterns. It seems to be a double-entry accounting system, with shell names and coded values, but the handwriting is unmistakable, and there are references to specific dates and locations that we can cross-reference with other data. The head of the cryptography team was optimistic. Helena approached, her eyes fixed on the pages. That notebook was the key to unraveling the web of corruption. With each name deciphered, with each value revealed, the image of that slap on the elderly candy vendor became clearer, more justified. It was not just personal revenge, it was the promise of a purification that the city had long awaited. The consultant in the interrogation room finally began to yield. The promise of protection, Almeida's pressure, and the certainty that Fonseca and Bittencourt could not help him were taking effect. He began to speak, his voice hoarse, revealing names of intermediaries, money routes, and the involvement of high-ranking political and business figures. He confirmed the existence of a council, a select group that orchestrated the most lucrative and dangerous operations. They meet in different locations, always with heavy security, never the same place twice. The next meeting is in 3 days. In an abandoned warehouse near the port. That's where they close the big deals, the ones involving international transport. The consultant spoke, his voice laden with fear and resignation. Helena felt a shock of adrenaline. A meeting of the council. It was the opportunity they had been waiting for to catch the real sharks. But the information needed to be verified. The trap, set with surgical precision, and Suarez's presence, so close, so normal, was a constant threat. Was he part of the council, or just an informant? The Inspector General returned to the monitoring room, her gaze determined. Carlos, we need a reconnaissance team at the port, discreetly. I want to know everything about that warehouse. And Dr. Almeida, continue with the consultant. Every detail is crucial. His safety is top priority. Operation Clean Sweep was entering its most dangerous phase. The network was revealing itself, but the risks were increasing exponentially. Helena knew that the next move would be decisive. The war was far from over, but the Inspector General was ready for the final battle, whatever the cost. Justice would be relentless. Adrenaline pulsed through Helena's veins, a frantic rhythm echoing the urgency of the situation. The council would meet in 3 days. 3 days to dismantle a network that seemed untouchable. The consultant's information was a double-edged sword, a golden opportunity and a monumental risk. Carlos, the reconnaissance team needs to be as discreet as possible. No one can suspect. I want blueprints of the warehouse, escape routes, blind spots, everything. And above all, I want to know if there's any unusual movement in the area. Anything that might indicate a trap. Helena's voice was a tense whisper, but charged with authority. She knew that the slightest failure could cost lives, and the entire operation. As the reconnaissance team mobilized under the cloak of night, Dr. Almeida continued his psychological dance with the consultant. The promise of protection, the guarantee of a new life under a witness program began to break down the last barriers of fear. They have an alert system, Inspector General, motion sensors, thermal cameras, and there are always snipers on the roofs of neighboring buildings. They don't trust anyone, not even each other. The password to enter the warehouse changes with each meeting. It's a phrase, a proverb, something only the council members know in advance. The consultant, now more relaxed but still visibly terrified, revealed the secrets of the crime fortress. He described the council members, an ex-judge, an influential businessman from the construction sector, a politician with a seat in parliament, and a mysterious figure known only as the architect, the true mastermind behind the most complex operations. In the analysis room, the head of the cryptography team burst in, his eyes gleaming. "Inspector General, Fonseca's notebook. We got it. It's a polyalphabetic substitution system, but the pattern repeats. The cover names are, in fact, references to roles and positions within the hierarchy. The gardener is responsible for money laundering, the builder is the real estate businessman, and the orator is the politician." With each revelation, the web became clearer, more terrifying. Fonseca's notebook was not just an accounting ledger, it was a detailed organizational chart of the criminal organization. And the names that emerged were the same ones the consultant had mentioned. Helena felt a chill. The confirmation was chilling. These were the pillars of society, the untouchables. That slap, the humiliation, now seemed a small sacrifice compared to the magnitude of the evil that was about to be exposed. Meanwhile, Ricardo Suarez's shadow deepened. Livia, with enviable discretion, continued to monitor him. "Inspector General, Suarez just left the office. He left a sealed envelope on his desk addressed to you. And before leaving, he made another call. This time, he didn't speak. He just listened for a few seconds and hung up. The number is the same as the previous call, the unregistered one." Helena felt a tightening in her stomach. The envelope, the silent call. Was it a provocation, a warning, or a trap? She instructed Livia not to touch the envelope and to maintain vigilance. The ambiguity of Suarez's actions was the greatest threat. He was a player, and his game was dangerous. The reconnaissance team returned exhausted, but with crucial information. "Inspector General, the warehouse is a labyrinth. High walls, few windows, and the only main access is through a reinforced iron gate. There are cameras in every external corner, some hidden in the vegetation, and we found recent heavy vehicle tire marks. It seems they use the place for more than just meetings." The team leader extended a tablet with detailed blueprints and aerial photos. "The good news is there's an old, almost forgotten service tunnel that leads to the basement of the warehouse. It's narrow, dirty, but it could be an infiltration route. Helena studied the blueprints, her mind already outlining the plan. The tunnel, a secret entrance. It was risky, but it might be the only way to catch the council by surprise. Dr. Almeida, did the consultant mention any vulnerability in the internal security system? Any blind spot, any routine that could be exploited? Almeida consulted his notes. Yes, Inspector General. He said that during meetings the focus on external security is intensified, but internal security relaxes a bit. They rely on their own invulnerability and the loyalty of their personal guards, who are few and stay closer to the council members. And there's an auxiliary power generator. If the main power is cut, the generator takes a few seconds to kick in, creating a brief window of darkness and disorientation. Helena's mind worked at high speed. The tunnel, the generator, the window of darkness. It was a risky plan, but feasible. Operation Clean Sweep would not just be an arrest. It would be a declaration that no one was above the law, no matter how high their position or how deep their influence. She gathered her most trusted team, her eyes fixed on each of them. The plan is as follows: infiltration through the service tunnel, temporary power deactivation, and then the assault. We need surgical precision, absolute silence, and perfect coordination. There will be no second chance. This is our opportunity to root out evil. But remember, the enemy has eyes and ears everywhere. Discretion is our greatest weapon. No one outside this room can know the details. No one. The tension in the room was palpable. The war was about to enter its most critical phase, and Helena Vasconcelos, the Inspector General, was ready to lead the charge. The echo of that slap on the elderly candy vendor, reverberating as a constant reminder of her mission. Justice would be relentless, and purification inevitable. The warehouse blueprint was spread across the conference table, a map of war drawn under the cold light of dawn. Helena traced lines with her finger, her mind a whirlwind of scenarios and countermeasures. The service tunnel, the infiltration route, was the riskiest but most promising bet. The assault team will split into two. The first, led by me, will enter through the tunnel. The second, through the main entrance, as soon as the auxiliary generator is activated. The goal is to create disorientation and divide their attention. Carlos, the head of the tactical team, nodded, his eyes fixed on the details. Inspector General, the tunnel is narrow and could be a bottleneck. We need maximum agility, and the external team needs to be ready to neutralize the snipers on neighboring rooftops at the exact moment of the assault. Surgical precision, Carlos. Every second counts. The electronic countermeasures team will disable external cameras and motion sensors on the warehouse perimeter 5 minutes before infiltration. The window of opportunity will be short. Helena took a deep breath, adrenaline already coursing through her veins. Dr. Almeida, did the consultant provide more details about the entry password? Any pattern in the proverbs? Almeida, with deep circles under his eyes but a sharp mind, consulted his notes. He said the password is always an ancient proverb, often with a touch of irony or cynicism, reflecting their worldview. And it is always spoken by the architect before anyone enters. No one else knows it until that moment. It's a way to maintain absolute control. The information was an obstacle. Without the password, the main entrance team could not infiltrate without a direct confrontation, which they wanted to avoid at all costs. This means the tunnel team will have to act first, and the external team will only enter after the confusion is already established. We cannot wait for the password. Helena readjusted the plan. Flexibility was crucial. As the tactical details were refined, Ricardo Suarez's shadow loomed. Livia Pale approached Helena. Inspector General, the envelope, I brought it. I didn't touch it as you asked. She extended a white envelope, sealed with red wax, a seal that looked ancient, with an unknown emblem. Helena took it, feeling the weight of the paper. She opened it carefully, the tension in the room palpable. Inside, there was no letter, no explicit threat, only a small object, a lapel pin of aged gold with the same emblem as the wax seal. Was it a symbol of some secret fraternity, of an exclusive club, or a badge of one of the council members? Suarez's ambiguity was his weapon. Was it a warning, an invitation, or a sign that he was more involved than they imagined? Livia, trace that emblem, every detail, and continue monitoring Suarez. If he appears, if he moves, I want to know. Every step. Helena's voice was a steel thread. The pin was a piece of a larger puzzle, and she had a feeling Suarez was enjoying the game. The next 2 days were a blur of intense preparations. The reconnaissance team made 2 more discreet incursions, confirming the presence of snipers and the security system. The tunnel was inspected, cleaned and prepared for passage. Each member of the assault team was trained for their specific role, repeating movements until exhaustion. The tension grew, a tight knot in everyone's stomach. The night before the operation, Helena met with her closest team. Their faces were marked by fatigue, but their eyes shone with determination. Tomorrow night, we will make history. It's not just an arrest, it's a cleansing. This city is suffocated by corruption, and we are its only chance to breathe. There is no room for errors. There is no margin for failure. I trust each of you with my life and with the future of this city. She looked at each one, the echo of that slap on the elderly candy vendor, the image of injustice driving her forward. The night of the operation arrived, cold and damp. The sky was overcast, perfect for discretion. The team moved like shadows, each in position. Helena, dressed in tactical gear, her face painted, felt the weight of responsibility. She was at the entrance of the service tunnel, the smell of damp earth and mold filling the air. Carlos was by her side. Countermeasures team, status. Helena whispered into the radio. Cameras and sensors disabled, Inspector General. Perimeter clear. 5 minutes to infiltration. The voice was calm, professional. Helena nodded to Carlos. Let's go. The assault team, a group of elite agents, crawled into the tunnel, flashlights attached to their helmets, illuminating the narrow, claustrophobic path. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by heavy breathing and the scuff of boots on the dirt floor. Each meter seemed an eternity. Helena's mind reviewing the plan, anticipating every possible complication. The tunnel opened into a small service room in the basement of the warehouse, a tangle of pipes and wires. Target sighted, auxiliary generator identified. One of the agent's voices came over the radio, preparing for main power deactivation. Helena positioned herself, weapon drawn, her heart pounding. On my mark. She waited, her ears alert to sounds from above. She could hear the muffled murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses. The council was meeting. Now! A dry click. The warehouse lights instantly went out, plunging the interior into total darkness. A chorus of exclamations and confused voices echoed, seconds of chaos, of disorientation. Then the roar of the auxiliary generator, and the lights flickered back on, weak, yellowish, but enough to reveal the surprised figures around a large table. Main team, in position! Helena shouted, her voice cutting through the air. Invade! The service room door was kicked open with a crash. Helena and her team burst in, weapons drawn, adrenaline exploding in a command shout. The war was about to begin, and the Inspector General was at its center, ready for the final battle, whatever the cost. Justice would be relentless. Helena's cry, "Invade!" echoed through the warehouse, cutting through the dim darkness and the murmur of confused voices. The faint lights of the auxiliary generator flickered, casting dancing shadows that distorted the figures around the large table. It was like an infernal stage, lit for the revelation of their sins. The service room door was kicked open with a final crash, and Helena's team burst in, a wave of tactical discipline against the chaos. Weapons drawn, movements synchronized, each agent a point of surgical precision. Surprise was their greatest weapon, and it hit its mark squarely. The council members, previously in their leather chairs, now rose in panic. Some knocked over glasses, others stumbled over each other. Their personal guards, outnumbered and caught off guard, took precious seconds to react. That lapse, that window of disorientation, was all Helena needed. "Hands on your heads! Police! Nobody move!" Carlos's voice, the head of the tactical team, cut through the air, amplified by the warehouse's acoustics. His men advanced, covering the flanks, isolating the targets. Helena, at the forefront, swept the room with her eyes, looking for the architect, the invisible leader who orchestrated the web of corruption. She found him. He wasn't the most imposing, but the one who displayed a cold, almost defiant calm, even amidst the pandemonium. A grey-haired man, impeccably suited, who now slowly rose, his eyes fixed on Helena. On his lapel, a discreet gleam, the pin. The same emblem as the wax seal Soares had sent. The puzzle piece fit with chilling precision. Soares wasn't there, but his message was clear. He knew the architect. He was part of the game, or perhaps the master behind the curtains, moving the pieces for his own benefit. "Don't move," Helena repeated, her weapon pointed at the architect, who watched her with a sardonic smile. "The operation is over." But the war would not end so easily. One of the guards, faster than the others, drew a weapon and fired. The shot ripped through the air, hitting a pipe and causing a jet of steam to escape. Helena's team's response was immediate and coordinated. Rubber bullets and tear gas filled the space, neutralizing the guard before he could fire again. Chaos intensified. Screams, coughing, the sound of bodies falling. Helena's team was trained to contain, not to kill, but the resistance was real. Other guards tried to react, but were quickly overpowered by superior tactical and numerical force. Then, another crash, not from the tunnel, but from the main entrance. The heavy iron doors of the warehouse were breached, and the second team, led by Carlos, burst in. A perfect pincer movement. The council members who were trying to flee to the back were cornered. The faint light of the generator now barely illuminated their pale faces and wide eyes of fear. "Inspector General, perimeter secure. All escape routes blocked." Carlos's voice came over the radio as he and his men spread out, ensuring no one escaped. Helena kept her focus on the architect. He didn't try to flee. He remained standing, his hands behind his back, the smile still on his face, as if all this were just a minor inconvenience. "Inspector General Vasconcelos, an honor," he said, his voice calm and controlled, despite the smoke and chaos around him. "We were expecting you, or, to be more precise, we were expecting someone." The man's calm was unsettling. Helena felt a shiver. He didn't seem surprised. Was it a trap, or was he just bluffing? "Your expectations don't change reality, sir. You are under arrest," Helena replied, her voice firm without wavering. "Arrested? Perhaps. But the game is far from over," he retorted, and then with a quick and unexpected movement, he brought his hand to the pin on his lapel, not to remove it but to activate it. A small flash of blue light emanated from the emblem, and a sharp, almost inaudible sound filled the air for an instant. "What is that?" Helena asked, the tension mounting. The architect merely smiled. "One last move, Inspector General. A message for those who need to know that the hunt has begun." Before Helena could react, one of the agents shouted, "Inspector General, radio signal intercepted. A coded message has been sent out of the warehouse. It seems to be an alert." Helena's mind raced. The pin was not just a symbol, it was a device. Soares had not sent a warning, but a detonator. He knew they would come, and he used the pin to ensure the architect could send an alert signal at the exact moment of capture. It was a game of chess, and Suarez was always 2 steps ahead, manipulating both sides. The purification was underway, but the web was more complex, deeper than Helena imagined. That slap on the elderly candy vendor had been just the tip of the iceberg, and now she was plunged into the depths of a conspiracy that seemed to have eyes and ears everywhere. The capture of the council was a triumph, yes, but also the beginning of a new, even more dangerous phase. The war would not end there, in that warehouse. It was just beginning. That blue flash, the almost inaudible sharp sound, was not an end, but a beginning. Helena's mind raced, processing the agent's information about the intercepted radio signal, Suarez, the pin, the architect's disturbing calm. Everything fit into a sinister pattern, a chess game where each piece was manipulated with surgical precision. "Collect the pin," Helena ordered, her voice cutting through the dense air of smoke and tension, "and arrest him with double handcuffs." The architect, still with that enigmatic smile, did not resist when the agents approached. He allowed the pin to be removed from his lapel, but his eyes never left Helena's. "The hunt has begun, Inspector General, and you unknowingly lit the fuse." "What did you send?" Helena asked. Her weapon still pointed, but the urgency in her voice was palpable. "A message to the others, to those who, like me, understand that power does not reside in a single point, but in an invisible network. They know the nest has been attacked, and now they will move." Carlos approached, the pin in his hand, examining it carefully. "It's a microtransmitter, Inspector General. It sent a pulse of encrypted data. Tracing the origin and destination will be a challenge. Do it, every byte, every frequency. I want to know who received that message and where it came from," Helena instructed, her attention divided between the device and the man in front of her. The other council members were being handcuffed, their faces pale and sweaty, terror replacing arrogance. The faint light of the generator flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock their downfall. But the architect remained standing, his posture erect, his calm unshaken. "Suarez, he's behind this, isn't he?" Helena questioned, her voice low, almost a whisper but charged with contained fury. The architect's smile widened. "Suarez is a man of vision, Inspector General. He understands that the old guard needs to be cleansed so the new can flourish. He's not behind it, he's ahead of it. He is the wind that moves the sails, the architect of a new era. And you, Inspector General, are the perfect tool for demolition." The revelation hit Helena like a punch to the gut. Suarez was not just a corrupt official to be caught, nor a disguised informant. He was a manipulator, a strategist who used the Inspector General's office as a hammer to break the existing structure, paving the way for his own ascent. That slap on the candy vendor, the ignition of her entire operation, had been in some way part of his plan. He had capitalized on her indignation, on her thirst for justice. "He knew I would come," Helena stated, not as a question, but as a bitter realization. He knew someone would come, and he made sure that someone was as relentless as necessary. "You are the brute force, Inspector General. He is the mind. Together, you are clearing the board for him." The bitterness was intense, but Helena's determination did not waver. If Suarez thought he could use her, he was mistaken. She would use this information to dismantle his network as well. The purification would not be selective. "Take him, and all the others. I want each of them in separate cells. And absolutely no one is to have contact with the outside world. No lawyers, no phone calls until I say otherwise," Helena ordered, her voice regaining full authority. "Carlos, prepare teams to search this warehouse. Every corner. I want all documents, all computers, every piece of paper.